that really probably changed the course of my life.
She had an incredibly successful career as a journalist in Christchurch, covering just about every story you could imagine.
Journalists have a role to tell stories.
A no-deal Brexit.
Then came the move to overseas.
Just been announced that it's a boy. What's your reaction?
Yay, that's so exciting!
And then everything changed.
My life took a very different turn.
Now bringing comfort and smiles to stressed mums in hospital has become a deeply meaningful part of her journey.
That started by a pretty terrible event in your life, didn't it?
Having your baby in the neonatal unit massively increases the risk of psychological trauma.
Meet Joy Reid in this edition of Let's Meet for Coffee, proudly brought to you by Black and White Coffee Cartel, serving absolutely delicious food all day, great coffee, and creating meaningful connections across Christchurch and in Auckland.
Joy Reid, nice to see you.
Thank you for having me.
Welcome to Black and White Coffee Cartel in Victoria Street. We go way back, don't we? Shall we tell the viewers first? I mean, we met at broadcasting school, is it 20 years ago?
More than 20 years.
Are you serious? 2000 and what?
Three.
Oh, it would be.
Yeah.
And you're the successful one, and I'm still doing local news.
Oh, well, I don't know about that.
No, I think that's
At least
fair.
you're still in news.
Yeah, just. Do you remember that moment where you thought, I want to go to broadcasting school and I want to be a reporter?
Yes, vividly. So I was that typical 17-year-old who had no idea what they wanted to do. But I was living overseas in Germany. I did an AFS exchange for a year, and I used to write letters home to my grandma, who lived here in Christchurch. And, on those old-fashioned, like, blue airmail things. Anyway.
Oh, my God,
I know,
yeah.
it shows my age.
Yeah.
And anyway, she said to me one day, man, I feel like I'm with you in Germany when I get your letters. You're so good at like taking me to a place and describing stuff. You should be a journalist. And at that point, I'd never even thought about it. But then the more I thought about it, the more it kind of aligned with my desire to tell the truth and stand up for people that couldn't stand up for themselves. And I'd always been an advocate for others, and so it just sort of was a natural fit. So in seventh form I thought, oh well, I'll try this whole broadcasting school thing, and the rest is history.
What year did you start working for Television New Zealand in Christchurch, was it?
Yeah, so I started there in 2009, having had 5 years of establishing my career in radio. So I worked in national radio, Radio New Zealand, or national radio as it was back then, as well as News Talk ZB. And I felt like I really honed my craft of storytelling while at national radio, and it was in that space that I had gone and into Myanmar and told some pretty big human rights stories and stuff too. So I kind of had grasped that passion for telling stories for the voiceless, I guess, being the voice for the voiceless. In 2009, I got offered a job down here in Christchurch with Television New Zealand, and just took it. And I guess you could say the rest is history, because in 2010 we had our first earthquakes. In 2011 we had the major ones in Christchurch, and that really probably changed the course of my life and also the course of my career.
That earthquake, particularly the second one, changed the course of life for so many people in Christchurch. And it's hard to believe that when you were telling those stories, it was affecting you as well. Like it was everybody.
Yeah.
It must have been, when you look back now, you should be proud of all the reporting you did there, because that was one hell of a job.
It was it's lovely to hear you say that. Thanks, Chris. It took me a long time probably to get to a place where I'd even accept a compliment like that. It was a really, really difficult season. In the immediacy of it, we'd go home to our broken homes with no showers and no toilets and stuff, chuck a bit of dry shampoo in your hair and come back to work a few hours later and hope that we could do the best job we could of telling the rest of the world what was happening on in our city.
We just want to play you again the footage that we received from our Christchurch newsroom of the second shake just a very short time ago. Here is the shots live at that time when it happened, the second shake.
By being exposed to all of that death and destruction, there was a cost, I guess. and that for me personally resulted in quite a long post-traumatic stress journey. I think everybody in the media did the very best they could. In fact, everybody in the emergency services, everybody in Christchurch, and I think that's what we all tried to do in that space. But for those in the media, it wasn't just one earthquake or thousands of earthquakes, I guess you could say. It was the 2-3 years of subsequent reporting on the earthquake day in, day out, day in, day out. And if you wanted to escape it, you couldn't. You were reporting on it at work, and then you were coming home to your insurance claims and your battles and, you know, getting your water back on and all those sorts of things. So it was an experience for the first time which blurred that line, the boundary you can usually put up when you're reporting on a topic, because usually you can put up an internal mental block that's, well, this is a story, this is someone else's journey that I need to do my very best at reporting. But that boundary wasn't there because we were living it the same way as we were reporting it. I think the thing about journalism is that unfortunately the news lends itself to more tragic news stories than it does to positive ones. So we do get exposed as journalists to a lot of unique moments in history, but those unique moments can often be ones that are pretty dark. So yes.
What is that, though, do you think, about human nature? Because often they'll be vilified for only reporting bad news, but that's not the case. But the algorithm sends people to bad news because they click on it. What is it about us that, if it bleeds, it leads, and there's truth in that, whether we like it or not? What do you think?
I think there needs to be a balance, and I think there is to a certain point. However, I don't think mass change happens without some level of cost. So we look at how, let's look at March 15, for example, like how much our nation has changed since that event. And if reporters had only decided to tell that story for a day or two, the huge change in culture wouldn't have existed within New Zealand. You look at the international outcry that there was when that happened, that happened because the world was grieving with us. And that grief is a journey. It's a journey. It isn't over in just 2 days of news stories. So I think journalists have a role to advocate and to tell stories that wouldn't necessarily get done. And change would not happen if you only ever did one story. The news can feel really depressing at times. However, you can't turn a blind eye to what's happening. We look at what's happening in Iran now. We look at what's happening, in Gaza. You can't ignore that only for good news, but there has to be a balance.
Was it hard finding that balance when you were the European correspondent for One News?
That was my dream 2 years. Yes and no. I had what I would call the dream stint as Europe correspondent, because during my 2 years, it's a 2-year job, I didn't have to cover any wars, which, if you think about it, is quite a big deal considering what's happened in the world. Ukraine happened after me. I didn't cover the pandemic because the pandemic happened just after I got home. I instead got to cover royal weddings, Harry and Meghan's wedding, and royal babies. I also got a really privileged view at the time there was a whole lot of 100-year centenary events for a lot of the World War I battles, and so I got to kind of walk through history with that. And while of course there's a lot of death and destruction that happened with that, the learnings and that have come out of that in the 100 years, and looking back at the sacrifice that was made and witnessing that was just really special. So while I did certainly have my moments, got tear gassed in France during some riots.
That's right.
Riots, and we had our moments, cameraman Will Green and I did have probably a more dreamy stint as Europe correspondent than perhaps some of my predecessors, and then also some of those that have had to report since then. So it was definitely a life highlight.
You know what I'm going to ask you? Can you guess what I'm going to ask you now about your
Something
time?
about Harry and Meghan?
No. I think it's better than that.
Oh, yes.
What?
You're going to ask me about Cher.
I think I even texted you, didn't I?
Yes.
I was so excited you got to interview, I won't say my icon, but I quite like Cher, just quietly. What was she like?
She was awesome. So,
Was she quite manufactured in her everything, or was it kind of a down-to-earth process, or she was there to do a thing and that's it?
No, she was more down to earth than I'd given her credit for. I will say that I had been warned. So obviously by the time I was interviewing Cher, we're talking someone who's had 50 years of media interviews. So we're in this room that costs £20,000, so like exquisite, chandeliers up the wazoo. And I have prepped like there is no tomorrow for this interview, because I had heard that if she thinks you haven't done your research, she's just going to give you blah answers, which I guess is her prerogative. Like if someone hasn't had the respect to research you beforehand, I can get it. But I had, let's say, over-researched, and I think she picked that up pretty quickly, that I really wanted this interview to go well, and she loved my Kiwi accent, like loved it, and so she warmed into it. Within a couple of minutes she got quite warm within the interview, and I feel like we really got along.
I think you did. I think she really liked you.
I think so too, but I was terrified, because this is a woman who has achieved so much and she doesn't need to give me a good interview. But she was so gracious, and we had great fun. It was amazing. Life highlight event.
I'm very jealous. I saw her live in Auckland. She was really good, by the way.
She is, yeah.
Any other highlights from your time in London?
I think I wasn't Europe correspondent at the time, but while I was there, there was a whole lot of planning in place for what we called London Bridge, which was the passing of Queen Elizabeth II, which we knew was going to happen. Unfortunately, that's life. And so I'd done a lot of preparation. I'd had, not interviews, briefings in Buckingham Palace where we'd been told how it was going to work. And part of my role at the time was to put this huge plan together as to how it was going to play out for TVNZ if that event happened on my watch. Now, it didn't. She didn't pass away until 2022, and I was home at the time. But because I'd been such a huge part of that planning process, I was privileged enough to travel from New Zealand over for the memorial and the funeral of Queen Elizabeth II's passing, and that would by far be my career highlight. It was one of the most privileged positions to be in, to watch history happen and get a front row seat at it. I saw her lying in state. I saw the grief happen. I saw the transition with the King coming into that role. And for me, that was definitely a highlight, even though I wasn't Europe correspondent at the time. And yeah, I just can't believe I was able to have a part of it, especially because my life took a very different turn soon after my return from England.
How did it change?
I got long COVID, which was really rough. So essentially, I had COVID a few months earlier, and my body had just never fully recovered from it. I had at the time undiagnosed celiac disease, which meant that my immune system was not in a space to fight off a virus in the way that it potentially could have, and over the ensuing months I got sicker and sicker and sicker, and so it was about 6 months after returning from the Queen's funeral where I thought I just needed a holiday, and it just got worse and worse, and I just couldn't get out of bed. And then over the 2 years or so that followed after that, my brain function stopped. I wasn't able to, noise, like the noise of this cafe would have ruined me. Noise, light, any type of memory. I couldn't walk past the end of the driveway. I'd have to use a wheelchair if I ever went out of the house. But there was a period where I wouldn't even be able to go out of the house, even in a wheelchair, because the stimulation of that was terrible. I remember having to go Christmas shopping, and that that meant the local warehouse for about half an hour to try and buy a present for my kids, and my daughter was pushing my wheelchair along the aisles so that I could at least buy my kids a Christmas present in person. I mean, I did buy most of it online. But yeah, it was a really tough period where I felt like I lost just my ability to function as a human. I couldn't parent my kids, I couldn't walk them to school, I couldn't be on their sidelines, I couldn't even cook. Just the energy required. And I think the conversation around long COVID has come a long way. So I was sick in 2023, 24. And at least it's acknowledged as a real thing now. But when I was sick, it was relatively new still. Well, no, new in New Zealand. It was definitely something that was being felt by a lot of people in the UK and the US. They call it, long COVID sufferers, the missing millions, because there are millions of them around the world. And the reason they're missing is because you just can't function. So you just hibernate back into your room and you just don't engage in life anymore. So you're essentially missing. And I think that's a really apt way to describe that season.
But how did you get? Because you must have got really depressed, because there's no kind of, at the time you probably thought there's no end to this. Did you think, this is my life now? How am I going to get through?
Initially, I wouldn't accept it, but I think acceptance was actually part of my recovery.
Yeah.
Things got pretty sad, dark. I think as hard as it was having 3 children, like my youngest was only 2 years old at the time, during being so sick, that made it so much harder because you couldn't truly rest. However, it also brought me great joy during my day and great purpose to try and find a way out of that season. So, for my kids and my family, I was so determined that this wasn't going to be my forever.
And it wasn't.
I had to accept, it could have been. No, it wasn't.
Because I remember when you talked to me about long COVID, but you were still battling through, you were still organising incredible functions for your charity from one mother to another, which we'll get to in a moment. And I remember thinking, gee, you've got 3 kids, I'll be at home, you're organising this, you're organising volunteers, you're organising events, but at the same time you're quite ill. I mean, as I was saying to you off here, if I have one meeting, I feel exhausted and have to go home and have to have a sleep. And I don't have kids, I've just got a dog. I don't know how you did it, but you did. I want to talk about from one mother to another, which is a fantastic organisation. For those unaware of how that started by a pretty terrible event in your life, didn't it?
Yeah, that's right. There's 2 friends, so a friend and I, so there's 2 mums. We set up One Mother to Another 10 years ago now.
10 years ago?
Yes, our very first care package went out in May 2016. So 10 years. And it was born, basically what we do is we give out care packages to parents and caregivers who are in hospital with a sick child. They're not the one that's sick, the child is sick, but they are of course at their hospital bedside, and also to mothers in mental health crisis. And this is a journey that I have experienced 3 times, or 4 times actually, but with 3 children. And my girlfriend at the time, Christina, had just experienced it with her toddler. So we decided, she actually created the very first care packages out of her own experience. And then from there, I hopped on board and thought it was a great idea. And together we kind of formed One Mother to Another. And it's been one of those journeys that I guess, having experienced what it's like to have a child so ill in hospital that you are unable to do anything, but yet you know that you need support. Having experienced it, I guess we didn't want any other parent to feel as lonely and as isolated as we felt. So a small care package seemed like a really small thing that we could do.
But it was such a big thing though.
As you know, a
lot of NICU babies and parents, and there is that isolating factor, but then just some small item made such a huge difference.
It's the connection factor, I think. So we write a handwritten note in every care package, and the items, there's probably about almost $100 worth of items within it. It's got really practical items in there as well as wellbeing items, but it's the handwritten note of encouragement and connection that goes in every single care package. And I think that's what really speaks to someone who is, you can be in a room full of people. You've got nurses, you've got babies, you've got visitors, if you're allowed to, if it's not COVID times, but you can feel so isolated in that space and just so full of fear. And having someone come alongside you and say, hey, we've sat in your chair, or a chair like your chair, and we know how it feels, but you can do this, you can get out the other side, and there is light at the end of the tunnel. I just think that is a message that is just so incredibly powerful. And it was, I guess, a bit of an accident that we discovered that was a need so deeply felt within our hospital system. And, fast forward 10 years, we're now giving away, this year will be over up to 8,000, I think just under 8,000 care packages will go out this year to more than 30 different hospital wards within the South Island. And we've got wards lining up for our support because for whatever reason, that connection and care is really resonating.
It's interesting, they often say about once you find your purpose, you'll be happy. And everybody wants purpose and meaning in their life. Do you remember when you thought to yourself, this is what I want to do, dedicate my life to, this organisation that you've created with your friend, and you were going to leave journalism for this? Was there a defining moment?
Well, the defining moment was my sickness. So I think I definitely agree with that concept of like, once you find your purpose. I felt that in journalism. I felt that my purpose was to be a journalist. And so when I got so sick that I couldn't be a journalist anymore, I went through a really deep grief period. Oh, wow. I really struggled with my identity. What am I supposed to do? And you talk about seeing counsellors. I had to work it through with a counsellor, realising that actually my body would not allow me to fulfil what I had thought was my purpose. And so that was a really tough decision. However, accepting that was a really big part. And then I just realised how much of a gift it was to have one mother to another. Because at the time it was a hobby. We weren't paid. I mean, we're only barely paid now, but it was all volunteer based at that time, but it was becoming obvious that if we wanted to move into the next season of scaling, there would need to be a level of professionalism around the organisation. And that hadn't happened because I guess I was so distracted with journalism and, we were quite small. And so as my health has improved, it's allowed me to pour more efforts and time and energy and love into one mother to another. And then that has been a really beautiful growth period. So as my health has increased, so too has one mother to another, so too has our team, so too has our volunteer base. And now I genuinely think that I'm living my God-given purpose today.
How amazing is that to be able to say that?
It's like an accident almost, but it's not. I feel like that was exactly how my life trajectory was supposed to happen. And I would hands down go through those experiences with my kids again, who I must say are now very healthy children. But during those experiences in hospital, I would have given my left arm, probably my right arm too, to have not had to go through that. It was horrific. And the years of trauma that came with that. But I would say I would do it again so that this beautiful organisation would exist today, because I see that it was such a huge part of that conversation and that journey into what one mother to another could be.
Isn't it amazing though that your organisation has expanded, but it feels, and I might be wrong, it's all happened quite organically. But at the same time, you probably look back now in retrospect and say, no, it wasn't organic, it was all purposeful. And here I am now running a charity that actually helps the well-being of mums and dads.
I couldn't have said it better. In fact, someone said to me the other day, like, there's two different types of organisations. One that start with a massive vision and they set a whole lot of goals to do that. There are others that start with an idea, see the impact, and from that impact it sparks a vision. And I think that's 100% been us. We didn't realise that a few care packages were going to make such a big difference in the lives of other parents, at the time mothers, but it has, and for whatever reason that's resonated, and it's built this beautiful community. We have up to about 200 volunteers, regular volunteers with us, and that's been a beautiful part of One Mother to Another's iteration. And then we get the privilege of walking alongside the journeys of around 8,000 parents a year in a really difficult space, but yet we get to just journey with them in some small way, and that to me seems like a good purpose.
When I've published several stories in the past about your from one mother to another, and some of the images I've used is just off the NICU room where it says, I think it says neonatal unit. And what I found very interesting is it's almost a double-edged sword for many parents. There was a sense of dread seeing that sign, but at the same time there was a sense of love because that unit helped babies survive. It must be a really weird feeling to be in, and you've been in that situation as well.
Yeah, twice I've had two unexpected neonatal journeys. I think the first was definitely the hardest. I never expected to be in there, and so I was just like, whoa, what is happening? Is my baby going to survive? And he's almost 13, he survived, and more than, he's thriving, but we are so lucky with the medical system and the treatment that our babies get within the neonatal unit, but we can't ignore the fact that those journeys, no parent chooses to spend the first up to 100 days of their baby's life, sometimes separated from them. It's just the most unnatural space. But of course, you would never choose anything else if your baby needed that medical care, but it does take its toll. In fact, maternal mental health is a big conversation within New Zealand. Around 15% of women do get postnatal depression. That is 3 to 4 times higher for parents who are having a neonatal experience. And I say parents because men are also affected by this. Having your baby in the neonatal unit massively increases the risk of psychological trauma that you will have as a parent, whether or not postnatal depression hits straight away or whether it kicks in 6 months later, a year later, 2 years later. There is just a real need to support the mental health of parents in that hospital system. And it's the same for people who, go in with a child who's ill in the paediatric space. The research shows that it doesn't matter necessarily whether your child is in there for a leukemia diagnosis, a broken leg, a terrible asthma attack, regardless of the health outcomes, potential outcomes for that child, the psychological trauma is still about the same level for a parent to see their child in that level of distress. And it can be just as high up to a month after coming home from hospital, because it doesn't leave the day your child leaves hospital. You are still carrying that anxiety and that fear and running on adrenaline. And if we can support parents in that space and validate that emotion and validate that experience, but also encourage them that there is light at the end of the tunnel, then I think that we have a real vital role within that health system.
But isn't it nice to know that you have a vital role in that? And it extends well beyond just the care packages. I mean, I remember going to an event that you had, and you just wrote a really sweet note to me. I can't remember what it was, and it was just a nice little wee note. And I remember thinking, wow, it was really lovely.
I think there is incredible power in a handwritten note of encouragement. And we have found that out by accident, and it has been one of the best accidents we've ever made. And it is such a privilege to think that we are adding value to someone's journey in some small way.
What's happening now for this year for you?
Well, I am mummying to 3 children whose level of life logistics is starting to get rather extraordinary, and just really pouring more energy into one mother to another. We have the most amazing team of not only staff, board, volunteers, and just seeing one mother to another's impact continue to grow, but also protecting and professionalising it so that it is sustainable. I want one mother to another to be around in 30 years, 40 years, 50 years. I want it to have nothing to do with me one day.
You might have to change it from one grandmother to another. Who knows?
You never know, but I would love to think that this kaupapa and this mahi will extend far greater than however it started.
It's really nice to see you. Congratulations on your newfound success.
Thank you. It's been amazing to sit with you and chat and reconnect.